Being that I've been in car sales for so long, anytime any of my friends are looking for a car, they always come to me for advice. But today I'm gonna try to give you some advice. So I wanna go over a little bit of purchasing and some things to look for, especially when leasing, and maybe why you should or shouldn't lease, as well as trade values. So let's get right into it. I'm Dustin Mason from Performance Lexus in St. Catharines. Make sure you hit like and subscribe for more Lexus related content. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of like the pricing of a new car and what it could look like. I will disclaimer, this is a Canadian price, so depending on where you live, could be different, but you're gonna get the same idea. So what we're gonna look at today, as you can see here, is a RX 350 luxury package. And you can see the MSRP of it is about $60,230. So that's what Lexus has recommended to sell it at. And then we have the luxury package, which adds about, $7,494. So then we give a little bit of a total MSRP here. Now, depending on which car brand you're looking at, I mean, if you're watching this channel, I hope you're looking at Lexus, but there could be a lot of line items in that top section. If there was like features that you pay for, what I call a la carte, or if you have to buy individual features, that's gonna be on that top section. If there's a premium paint charge, that's gonna be on that top section as well. Or if the brand that you go with just lists their features out, it's gonna all be there. But for Lexus, it's always in a package, so it's really easy. Okay, so as we scroll down, we have our federal AC tax, which in Canada is $100. There used to be a TSF for tires, which is like, I don't know, I think that's like a disposal fee almost, and that's at $0. Destination and delivery, and this has changed so many times. It used to be called freight and PDI. It used to be separated on different line items, but essentially that is the biggest and most mandatory fee that there is on this. Unless you go with a demo, then you can sometimes get that removed. But essentially, it's mandatory, it's fixed, there's nothing we can do to change it, and it is on there. Ours is the Performance Pro Pack fee, so that's for $698. Some dealerships might have an administrative fee, they might have some sort of dealer fee. Ours is actually just a product. So that product, I mean, I could talk about that for a long time, but essentially at our dealership, it gives you like an etch program on the car. So if it is stolen and not recovered in a set amount of time, you can get some more money back. It also gives you like a limited tire warranty, etc. But again, each dealer is gonna have something different there. The price is gonna be different. Ours is $698. Some is gonna be higher than that. Some is gonna be lower, but probably not a whole lot. And yeah, that is technically like an extra charge that dealerships have added. Then we have a filter fee for $1. We have ONVIC fee for $12.50. ONVIC is the governing body for us dealers in Ontario. So we do pay them per every transaction, and it's $12.50. And that gives us a total sales price of $70,763. And I want you to remember that number. Then we add tax to that. And in this case, that tax, where we live, is $9,199. So 13% tax. Then we have a non-taxable fee, which is just your licensing. So if you need new license plates, it's gonna be $59. And it's a total of $80,021. So the reason I wanted to give you this little bit of a rundown is because I wanna talk a little bit about ways to purchase. So the self-explanatory one would be to just pay cash for this. And yes, $80,000 to some of our viewers might be really easy, and maybe they need somewhere to spend their money, so they're gonna just tie it up in their car. However, I usually have a little bit different scenario for it. I like to lease because I don't wanna tie up all that money in a depreciating asset. I'd rather, take a little bit of that risk off, have it more of like a fee that I pay every month. And it creates a little bit more of a flexible scenario, but it's not for everyone. Before working at a dealership, which I've been doing for about 10 years now, I used to think leasing was more like renting a car. And then I started working here and I was like, oh no, there's a lot more to this, there's a lot more benefits, and there's a lot worse things that can happen if you don't do it, and at least can protect you that way. So the easy way to do it is, you can always look at a finance, and with Lexus right now on a car like this, you can do up to a 6-year finance. Now, depending on the term, the interest rate's gonna be a little bit different, depending on if you have any money down or trade down. The monthly payment's gonna be a little bit different. But to give you just a quick idea on like a 6-year finance, it should be around $1,308 with no money down. On a 5-year at 4.9, and the 6-year was 5.5, it would be about $1,500 a month. And on a 4-year at 4.9, it's gonna be about $1,840. Now, if we decided to put some money down, let's say we say $10,000, And you can even see on, let's just do it on that 4-year, I'm gonna hit recalculate, and we can see what that monthly payment ends up being. It ends up going down to like $16.10. So not a huge amount, but still a decent amount, and you would get a little bit of savings on interest for doing that. Because doing, any type of finance, you are gonna pay some interest over the term, but it still might be worth it instead of tying up your money. The other option is leasing, and there's so many things to think about when leasing that I sometimes miss some of these details in person because there is a lot of them. But for instance, I've thrown up a few different scenarios here. And leasing is totally different than finance because we want to think about not just interest rates, but we want to think about what's called a residual. And that's really important, and I'll get to that. But for instance, a 4-year lease with 24,000 kilometers, no money down, actually on this car ends up being like $1135. And let's say instead of a finance, you're gonna lease it, but you might buy it out at the end of the lease. Then the mileage isn't gonna matter as much because you're gonna buy it out. But if you are planning on returning it at the end of the lease, or you want some flexibility, or maybe even trade in early, the mileage that we set up is important. So it defaulted to 24,000 on this quote, but we can change it, and that manipulates a few things. The residual on this 4-year lease is $30,475. Now residual just means what is that car worth at the end of the lease. So in this case, Lexus is saying if you wanted to keep this car at the end of the lease, you have to pay us $30,475 plus tax, and then there's like a lease buyout fee of like $350. And where I live, you have to get the car safety to do so because you're switching ownership from Lexus Financial to your personal name. And every time we do that, we have to get it safetied. So there is that, but it gives you the flexibility that we like. So for instance, if we have this $1135 and you already saw that residual of $30,475, if I lower, let's say I lower the kilometers all the way down to like 16,000 a year. And by the way, all dealers use different software. So this one is called 180. It's the one that my dealership uses. Luckily, it's always been the one I've used. So I've gotten really used to it over the years. Okay, so now it's showing 32.5 is the buyout at the end of the lease. And the payment itself is $1,090. That's with tax, by the way. You can see a pre-tax payment here of $965. And that's one thing about leasing too that's nice is you're not paying tax on the overall purchase of the car, just what you're using, so just the payment. So that payment is $965 plus tax, which gives you $1,090. Now, if we put some money down, which I don't always recommend on a lease, but maybe we keep it low, we do like $5,000, that could get us to below the $1,000 mark. So now we're $866 plus tax and a taxes and payment of $978. Now with a lease, when you're thinking about money down, it's really just prepaying the lease. So again, unless you're trying to like budget and get it under a certain amount, it's not really benefiting you other than that because you're kind of just, prepaying a little bit of what you're already gonna pay. Where like on a finance, you're gonna own it at the end, so it's a little bit different. One thing about Lexus, and I would say this for Toyota as well, this residual is pretty light on the light side. And what I mean by that is a 4-year-old RX, most of the time, especially in a luxury package, is selling for over this by quite a bit, maybe even like 8,000 more than this. So let's say it's selling for 40,000. So you might say, well, Dustin, what's with that? What are you gonna do for me? This gives us a few things. One, it means if you're gonna buy this lease out at the end of the term, you're buying it out for $32,500. Even if in the used car market they're selling for $40,000, you're still buying it out for this agreed upon price of $32,500. So that means you're getting like a wholesale, you're like buying a car off yourself for like the best deal possible. And I love the flexibility there. But here's the other thing it does. Let's say at the end of the lease, you decide to trade it in and get the newest and latest and greatest RX, or maybe you want to decide to move to an LC or a Corolla or anything else. You'll have some equity there because, your dealership might appraise this car and say, you know what, Dustin, I know your buyout is $32,500, but we appraised your car, it's actually worth $35,500. So that money goes to you. Mainly only if you do it ahead of time. So if you start that process ahead of time, if your kilometers are good, if you took good care of the car, all of those things can play out to your benefit when talking about this residual. And I even have a lot of my guests lease the car in a company name and then buy it out in their personal name, and that's kind of like a way that they manage their expenses, and that's a little hack that I've learned over the years. Now, there's one more thing about leasing. Let's say you say, Dustin, I don't want to pay 3.9% interest, but I got some money burning a hole in my pocket. You can do what's called a security deposit, multiple security deposit, where you essentially lend your lease or your Lexus Financial some money. Let's say 10, which would be, I think it's gonna be about $10,000, which I think is the max on this car. That would lower that interest rate down by 1.5%. And then at the end of the lease, you get that money back. So instead of this money down isn't like prepaying your lease, instead it's kind of like you're loaning Lexus some money, and in return, they're gonna give back to you at the end of the lease, and they're gonna give you a rate reduction in the meantime. And this is a great way if you're leasing a Lexus for the first time, because the next time you lease, you're gonna get what's called a loyalty interest rate, which right now is a 1.5% reduction anyway. And you can combine that with this, so you can get some good rate reductions once you get in like the lease family is what I call it, or like the lease program. I hope this gives you a little bit of insight into leasing. It does make sense most of the time. I would say the only times it doesn't really make sense is if you need to like spend some money right now and like get that off the books or something, or if you do a lot of mileage, then it might be a little bit of a risk for you. But one of the risks that it takes away is like if something happened to this $80,000 RX, knock on wood, during your ownership, that's gonna depreciate it. So let's say you get in an accident, hopefully that never happens, or someone hits it, and it does 30,000 in damage. If you own that car, your car just depreciated because of that. But if it's a lease, you can still just return that lease at the end, no matter what. As long as it gets fixed, even if it has that claim, Lexus is still taking it back. So this is one of the questions I get from a lot of my friends is like how leasing works, what are some tips for it, things like that. My final tips would be, don't put too much money down if you don't have to. I would say try to calculate the mileage, but don't stress too much about it. Like, if I think I'm doing 22,000 kilometers, I'll just do a 24,000 kilometer lease. And it's not like that money's gone, because at the end, it just means my buyout, there might be some equity there. Look at it as like more of like a good way to spend your money instead of tying it all up in a purchase, which again, isn't for everybody, but I do get asked that question. And it's not just like renting a car, because I've seen so many people play this game right. In fact, an LC500, if you lease an LC500 right now, look at what they're going for used. Usually like a 4-year-old one is going for like, 80 and 90 grand still right now in Canada. And the residual on a 4-year lease is like 50 grand. So if you play that, with the right kind of, car and scenario, you can end up in a really nice position afterward. So the second part about this video is gonna be about trade values. So a lot of times, friends of mine will ask me their trade, info or like advice on their trade. And it's not like I'm a genius. I can't just like look at a car and like call its value. I rely on tools. So the tool I use is called vAuto. We pay for it. It takes a lot of info from AutoTrader and it puts it into like a really condensed spot. A couple things I want to note here. So I'm just going to do like a fake appraisal here. 2022 Lexus IS 300. We're going to just assume, it's in good condition. I should put some mileage in there. Maybe it's got like 45,000 kilometers, and it's going to help me calculate. One of the first things I'm going to do is check out what are they selling for in the marketplace. So I can see ones with similar mileage to me, are listed in the high 30s mark, let's call it 39.9, maybe into the low 40s. And I need to decide, okay, what would I be able to sell it for? Well, one of the things that's important is how long it's gonna take to sell, because anybody can ask any price for any car, but if it sits for like a whole year, and cars depreciate at a rate of like weekly or daily sometimes. So usually the rule of thumb is that if you can sell it in 30 days, you can retain some profit. But if you wait 90 days, you're probably gonna lose money on it. You're probably saying, Dustin, I'm not a dealer, I don't care. But it's important to you to understand what the dealer is thinking or calculating so that you can understand where they're coming from when they present you that trade number. And in this situation, I'm thinking, okay, I don't want it to sit very long. I want it to move pretty quick. It's got good kilometers. So maybe listing it at 39.9 isn't gonna be a bad idea. Now I have my sale price of 39.9, and I have some specs there that say it should sell within like 60 days at that price, something like that. And then I think profit-wise, in today's used car world, not looking to get rich on this one, I'm thinking 2,500. And then I have to think reconditioning. Now this is the tricky part, because even if a car is perfect, I tried to set up, somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500 in just getting it like marketed, advertised, certified, pre-owned, registered, cleaned up, detailed, put on the lot, safety, all that stuff. And then if it needs more, I have to add that on to like that 2,500. So in a car like this, an IS 300 with 45,000 kilometers, I know even if it's been well taken care of, those front tires with the camber that the car has might be time for replacement. So I'm just gonna add an extra 1,000 to my reconditioning costs. And in turn, that's gonna lower my appraised value to like, 33,000 or 33.3. Maybe I bump it to 33.5 to be able to offer them a little bit more. That's one thing that I know a lot of my friends, when they reach out to me about, AutoTrader, maybe they saw the car they traded in on AutoTrader for like 5,000 more, and they think the dealer's probably making their face off of it. Usually it's not the case because maybe that dealer had to recondition it a little bit higher. Maybe they're just like testing the waters and they're like pricing it high for like the first week, and that happens too. So I do always recommend, do a little bit of research, make sure the car is super clean when you're getting it appraised, because that just shows that you take good care of it. If there's anything that you can do ahead of time, whether that's like tires or stone chips or whatever, definitely if it's glass, that's important too. That can help your trade value a little bit. And just remember when, a dealer presents you a trade value, in this case, it's $33,300 plus tax savings. So instead of the dealer being like $35,000 with tax, say, what is the pre-tax number, right? Because there's a whole thing there. Depending on how you buy or lease your next car, you're gonna save some taxes from doing it. And I think trade-ins right now are more important than ever because there is a lot of fraud going on out there. So it's becoming more, scary to list your own car privately right now. I think doing it through a dealer is probably the safest way, but I could always give you advice on that as well in another video. So yeah, that's kind of just giving you an idea of how I appraise cars, some of the things that we look at as a dealer, and how that could really make a difference for what you do when you go to trade-in. I'm Justin Mason from Performance Lexus in St. Catharines. I hope this video helped you with a little bit of car buying dealership expert advice. Let me know in the comments if it did, or if there's any videos like this that you would like to see, and I'll see you in the next video.